Hey everyone, good morning, happy Saturday. Wanted to do a video talking about the title of Jehovah's Witnesses, the cult, and also other types of groupthink that could be looked at as cults today. This should be an interesting topic. I know there's lots of things going on in the world today that where you're seeing the abolishment really of individuality. And we're going to kind of go into a little bit more detail on that. I've got some articles pulled up. Google search. I basically just do Google searches and pull up definitions and some things a couple articles I think that are pretty spot on as far as how to identify a particular group as a cult. Obviously, not all groups are cults. Some ladies get together for a game of bridge every week. That's not a cult. That's a group. That's a social group. So there's different types of groups. Not all of them are obviously bad, but many that there are characteristics of certain groups that you could easily identify as cults. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's jump into some of the identifying markers of a cult. So I found this article from The Atlantic. This was published back in 2014, so it's it's pretty up to date. It's not really old information, and it goes into some detail. Obviously, they're having a personal experience of somebody that was in a cult, and so they have 7 key characteristics listed here that help identify that the group you're in or the group you're associating with or thinking of associating with, why they might be a cult. So these are the things you would look for, red flags that you would be looking for. And the first one is opposing critical thinking. That's a big one. Pretty much, at least religious cults, so we'll talk about the cults that are religious based. So religious based cults like Jehovah's Witnesses, like Scientology, like Mormonism, that is a huge red flag. You'll find out right away is they don't want you to have critical thinking. They don't want you questioning every little thing. You'll find out real quick if you're in these groups that if you start to question, hey, why do you believe this? This doesn't make any sense. Help explain this to me. A lot of times the answer will be, well, you have to trust in the religion, trust in God. They'll explain it away. And when I was a Jehovah's Witness, that was a common phrase. Was, oh, you just have to trust in Jehovah. All will be revealed in time. And it was never, well, they would never admit, well, we don't really know. They would never do that. They would never say, well, yeah, we could be wrong. We're just guessing here on that particular doctrine or that particular issue. We don't have all the facts. We don't really know. You're never going to hear that. You're just going to basically have opposed opinion and opposed position to your question. So that's a big one. Opposing critical thinking. All cults, that is easily the first identifiable red flag that you're in a cult, is when you're questioning things, especially if they view it as being critical. Number 2 is isolating members and penalizing them for leaving. That's another great one. That Leah Remini show she did on Scientology, that was one of her big things that she would say all the time. How do you know you're in a cult? You don't know until after you leave. That's how you know you were in a cult. It all changes when you decide to leave the group. And that's one of the ways they do it. Shunning, the penalizing is the shunning. Typically cut them off. They want family members to cut off other family members for leaving the group. So that's one way they do it, and it's a very powerful tool that they use, because I mean they've done all kinds of studies to show that. I mean, I remember one study where they had 12 people lined up, and 11 people would do something incorrect, and the 12th person, after observing them do this thing incorrect, they would be compelled. They would do the same thing, not because they knew that that was the right thing to do, but they were they were pressured into doing it. They conformed, and it's natural for human beings to conform. We're naturally tribal. In fact, you go way back to the history of human beings. That's probably a survival technique. You probably weren't going to survive very long by yourself, right? So human beings would congregate into tribes, families, groups, and that was a way to survive, especially, you know, early beginnings of man. You didn't have a lot of tools. You didn't have a lot of defense. The defense was being in larger groups. You know, that was part of survival. So isolating members, that hits at the core of being a human being. It's built into us that we want to associate with people and be in part of a group. That's just, I mean, if you're a kid in school, you know, you remember it wasn't a good feeling when you weren't picked to be on a particular team. You know, if you were in recess, whatever, having that isolating feeling is definitely not a good feeling. And so it is a motivating factor for keeping people inside that group, is if they know they're going to be isolated or shunned or penalized, it creates a conforming of behavior. So that's one thing that I think is a huge red flag as well. Number 2, isolating members and penalizing them for leaving. That's a huge identifier for knowing you're in a cult. Number 3 is emphasizing special doctrines outside Scripture. So this third point is really talking about religious cults. I mean, there's cults that have nothing to do with the Bible. You know, they're social constructs. But obviously religious cults, religions that are based on, hey, we have the truth of the Bible. We have the way. No one else does, but we do. So again, emphasizing special doctrines. It was revealed only to our group, right? We have a special knowledge that nobody else has. That is a huge red flag right away. If you hear that, whoa, hold up a minute. So everyone in the world, billions of people, don't know what you know. You have some special knowledge. Yeah, that's a major, major red flag. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with any type of group, especially religious. If they claim to have special knowledge no one else has, that's a cult. Number 4, seeking inappropriate loyalty to their leaders. So cults that, like I'm thinking the Branch Davidians, that comes up to mind right away. Very loyal to this guy. He was very charismatic. David Koresh, I think was his name. You know, it was a small group. I think, 20 to 30 people. I don't think it was more than that, maybe 50 people at most. And they were willing to die for this guy. So yeah, is that inappropriate loyalty? Yep, definitely inappropriate loyalty. And of course, a lot of these leaders, it's not a surprise. It comes out that there's some scandal. They're involved sexually with other members. This is a common theme. And I would say with Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body, that's the leadership. So of course, the Jehovah's Witnesses will say, "Oh, we don't have one leader." They used to, for many, many years, they did have a president of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. I think when I was in Bethel, they had just done, I think the guy that was just president had just passed away. He was in his late 80s. I think he was the last president. His last name started with an M. I can't remember now. Yeah, I'd have to look it up. But I remember he was the last president. That was probably in the, he died in the early to mid 90s. And after he passed, at that point, there was really they did not name any president anymore. It was basically, with the eight member body have supposedly equal position of leadership. So with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a governing body, which is a little bit more unique, than, let's say, Scientology, where you've got basically one guy running everything, and he's the leader and he calls the shots. Here you've got 8 men that call the shots, and are basically controlling supposedly 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide. But that was always a thing as a Jehovah's Witness, because let's face it, if you grew up being a witness, you go door to door, you would get that you're a cult thrown at you all the time, which of course it was true. We were a cult. Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. But the quick response would be, well, we don't have one leader. So that was something that they were trying to use to combat saying that we were a cult, was, well, we don't have one leader. We have a congregational arrangement. We have elders. They want the witnesses to believe that there is no one leader, but there is a group of leaders, 8 guys up in New York. They call the shots. They are the final word on anything. So, is there one guy in that group that has more power than the other members? I'm sure there's, probably the oldest. I'm sure there is tenure, even within that 8 body member, or there's somebody that opposes their will more than others. So yeah, I'm sure that there is a leader in that group, but basically it's 8 guys up in New York that call the shots. Other religious cults, most of them, there's one leader typically that is doing all that. Number 5 is dishonoring the family unit. You see this definitely with Jehovah's Witnesses, definitely with Scientology. Those 2 come to mind right away. They have the practice of shunning, which dishonors the family unit. If somebody in that family unit steps outside the rules, does something wrong, gets disfellowshipped, they are, of course, shunned. In the Scientology religion, they use the term disconnect. You're disconnected from this person because they're a bad influence. Same thing with Jehovah's Witnesses. You must stay away from a disfellowshipped person because they can bring you down spiritually. So whether or not the claim is, oh, we don't if a young one gets disfellowshipped, we don't tell the parents that they kick them out. But let's face it, the relationship changes. It's definitely conditional love. Why do you think there's so many opposers to this religion now? Because why is the XJW community so huge? It's because they dishonor the family unit. That's one of the biggest things. And it's absolutely a red flag for identifying a cult. Number 6 is crossing biblical boundaries of behavior versus sexual purity and personal ownership. Most cults, most religions, in fact, violate sexual boundaries and are trying to control especially the reporting sexual abuse. Catholic religion had major problems with that, covering it up. Jehovah's Witnesses have had problems with that. Scientology's had problems. All these major religions, most religions are going to have these issues, and those boundaries are going to be violated. It's human beings. Human beings are massively flawed and do wrong things all the time. And the fact that they're in that group, especially Jehovah's Witnesses are a perfect example of this. Everything must be covered up to protect supposedly the sanctification of Jehovah's name, right? This cannot reflect bad upon Jehovah. So of course they cover it up, keep it quiet. which has backfired on them dramatically because all it's done is it's brought more reproach. It's brought more attention to the fact that they've been covering these things up. It's done the exact opposite of what they intended to do. So number 6, that's also a big one with all cults. Number 7 is separation from the church. This one's sort of an iffy one. You can argue that the church is a cult. They still control people. The Catholic Church still controls a lot of people all over the earth, not as militant as Jehovah's Witnesses do. But most cults, most small group religions, smaller religions they branch off from other religions. So basically the origins of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Protestant movement in the United States, there was groups of religious people. The big one were I think the Millerites. These were people that were using numerology in interpreting Bible scripture. And from that group, you had Seventh-day Adventists came out of that group, Jehovah's Witnesses through Charles Taz Russell. That's the origin of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Back then they were called the International Bible Students. These were all splinter groups from that Adventist movement, which was out of the Protestant movement, really just opposed to the main religion at the time, which was Catholicism. It was very easy to see the hypocritical nature of Catholicism. Some of the things the Catholics were doing were in direct violation in the Bible. So that's what created these smaller groups, which then grew into cults. Seventh-day Adventists, they're kind of, I don't know if they hit all the earmarks of a cult, but I definitely think that they're definitely a smaller group. And I'm just not as familiar as to whether they shun or isolate their members, but they are definitely one of those groups that came out of that Protestant movement back in the 1800s. So yeah, there's your 7 identifiers of a cult. Jehovah's Witnesses hits on every single one. So does Scientology. There's just a lot of issues there. So something good to think about. I like this article from The Atlantic. There's lots of research done on this. There's books on cults that go into more detail on the characteristics, but typically 7 to 10. I've also read articles there's 10 characteristics that you're in a cult. But I think that grouping of 7 does a pretty good job of explaining it. So yeah, I like that. I think that does a good job. All right, let's move on to, I'm going to share another screen with you. So I'm going to talk also about groupthink. Groupthink can definitely lead to cult-like activity. So the definition here is the practice of thinking or making decisions as a group in a way that discourages creativity or individual responsibility. So you see a lot of examples of that today. Obviously, religious groups that groupthink is really cultish. We have lots of examples of that today, but there's also examples of groupthink in the modern day that it's kind of shocking. Let's see, one that comes to mind right now, Black Lives Matter. That seems to be a very big groupthink movement. There are elements of the group that seem on the surface to be appropriate, seem to be of valid, of course, Black Lives Matter. Black people have had history of oppression, not just in this country, in many countries throughout the world. That's been well documented. That's obviously well known. But when you dig in deeper into that group, you find out that many within that group, even the leadership of Black Lives Matter, are very racist. And they not only think Black Lives Matter, They think Black lives are the only lives that matter. So that's not right. So that's another thing that I've noticed as an example today, where something is clearly wrong there within the group, but the group think they are pressured into thinking you all have to think this way. And yeah, it discourages creativity. It discourages questioning. That's another thing I've noticed. This United States, really, the formation of the country was the escaping religious oppression. A lot of it was financial. Let's go find and claim new land. So a lot of it was financially related. Some of it was religious persecution related. But really, the average American at the start of this country had a lot more individual thinking ability. Today, I see the opposite of that. Today, I think everyone wants to be in a group. It's very tribal. You got political groups, Democrats, Republicans. You've got Black Lives Matter. You've got Blue Lives Matter. You've got all these different groups, and it's this groupthink mentality that can become very, very dangerous. Here's Wikipedia's definition. Of course, I don't know if Wikipedia is all that much of an authority, because I think anybody can basically put in their own information on Wikipedia. It says it's a psychological phenomena that occurs within a group of people in which the desire for harmony or conformity in the group results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. Cohesiveness, or the desire for cohesiveness in a group, may produce a tendency among the members to agree at all costs, right? So Black Lives Matter, that's a perfect example. Many in that group are doing illegal criminal acts, and of course, there's no critiquing that. There's no one talking out against it within the group. Everyone within the group wants to continue this cohesiveness, even though there are signs of dysfunction, irrationality, no critical evaluation. So I do find this very fascinating, groupthink. It's a construct of social psychology, but it has an extensive reach and influence in literature in the fields of communication studies, political science, management, organizational theory, as well as important aspects of deviant religious cult behavior. So there you go. It intertwines with religion. So groupthink is not just religious, though. It can be political, it can be social, critical race theory now. I know there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of opposition to that now, because obviously it does promote a racist viewpoint. And you think about it, we have examples in history where people today go, how did that happen? How did Hitler come to power in Germany and convince millions of Germans to follow him? And he didn't mince words. He had speeches that outright said we need to round up Jewish people and we need to kill them. How did he get all these millions of Germans to go along with that? It's quite fascinating if you think about it. I've done a lot of study on that. The German people, I think, you had a combination of a leader that somehow was able to instill fear, psychological fear, and had the ability to also be somewhat charismatic. I think today we see someone, the way he yelled, that doesn't seem very charismatic to me, but maybe to a German, in the 1930s, that was fascinating to watch, I guess, for the German people. It's amazing. He literally, that was a huge example of groupthink that led to irrational, dysfunctional decision-making, that led to mass death, mass destruction. It was just amazing. That's probably the one example that shows that people can go down a very bad path with groupthink mentality. So this was something I wanted to touch on. I had a couple of subscribers message me saying, you should talk more about cults and, how that even kind of carries over to what we're seeing today with different social groups, the pressure there on both sides, political, social, all that. And it's dangerous. I think it is dangerous. I like the idea of individuality. I don't like being in a group. I just don't. I think it's mainly because I was in that Jehovah's Witness religion all those years. I was in that groupthink mentality and was manipulated, indoctrinated for so many years. Now I'm the complete opposite. I don't want to be part of any group. I don't associate with any tribe. I think individuality is important. And I think that's something I'm trying to strive for all the time. And I think it's a good quality to have, to be an individual, not just go along with the group. Have a difference of opinion, be able to express your opinion. And these days, you've got this cancel culture going on where somebody says something that may not be politically correct or may not be the nicest thing said, but it doesn't mean it's not true. And all of a sudden we're supposed to just cancel them. And I think that is the dumbest thing ever, is this cancel culture mentality. It's really authoritarian type of behavior that does not end well at all. So I'm hoping that, you're seeing this not just in the United States, but many other countries where you've got this groupthink mentality, where if someone says something that's an opinion that the group doesn't like, they want to cancel that person. They attack them on social media. And I really think social media is creating massive amounts of groupthink, and it's not good. There are good things about social media. I have a Facebook account mainly to just keep in touch with certain friends, definitely friends from my high school years, things like that. But I don't have a Twitter account. I think Twitter, I don't see any value to Twitter at all. I just don't. I think it's just a place for people to work out their rage, I guess. To me, Twitter seems like a ridiculous platform. So I'm not a big social media person. I am on YouTube with a couple channels, and I like to express my opinion. And that's what I do. I like to just give my opinion on things. You don't have to agree with it. I don't ask for anyone to agree with it. That's the thing about individuality. You can express an opinion, and it doesn't have to conform with other people's opinions. That's the beauty of being an individualist. And that's sort of what I kind of view myself as an individualist. I don't want to have that groupthink mentality. Usually that doesn't lead well. It doesn't go well if you follow a group, especially blindly. There's people that will associate with a group for a while, a social group, maybe political, and at some point they realize, oh boy, things are going off the rails here. Hopefully you have the ability to pull away from that group, pull away from that group thinking mentality. I think that's a fantastic skill to have in life, is to have critical thinking, question everything. I mean, I think that's the way to go. If you do that, you're going to avoid cults. You're going to avoid the groupthink mentality, some of these groups that are not good to be associated with, and just be an individual. I think that's hopefully what we'll see a movement in, is individualism versus just being part of a group. But unfortunately, human beings were wired to be in that groupthink mentality. So, yeah, I mean, it's all about, human beings are strange creatures, right? We have the ability to think. There's nothing on the planet that has the ability to do what we do, which is to contemplate our own existence, contemplate what are we doing in our lives, right? It'd be so much easier to just not have to think about those things. But that's the burden of being a human being, right? All right. So that's what I had to say, guys. I appreciate everyone who took the time to watch this morning. I know most people will watch this on the replay. I think this is only my 4th or 5th video, so I'm still new in the XJW YouTube channel game. I think I'm up to like 330 subscribers. I'm going to try to do these videos a lot more often. I'm thinking at least a couple times a month. I think that will help. I appreciate everybody that leaves a comment. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I like to respond to people. I've got some good interactions with people in the comment section. And that's it, guys. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and I'll see you guys soon.